A lot of times executives tell me they have an issue and we go collect the data. It doesn't exist. So with executives, it's stop jumping to solutions, stop jumping to root causes, and talk in measurable terms. I ran into a former black belt that I trained years ago, and she said, I'm famous for in meetings saying, that's an opinion, where's your data? And I'm like, yes, that's my course right there. That's an opinion, where's your data?
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Lee Campe. Lee is a Lean Six Sigma consultant, educator, and certified Six Sigma Master Black Belt with deep experience helping teams improve processes, solve problems, and build better performance systems. Lee is a graduate of the elite U.S. Army Ranger School. He brings proven leadership principles into every engagement. Through his consulting work, his training videos, and practical teaching style, Lee has helped make Lean Six Sigma tools more accessible to students, leaders, and improvement professionals. Lee, we're so happy to have you join us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Well, we have a tradition here. We like to start our podcast with a little question we refer to as the spark. I'm curious if you recall what it was back in your history that first led you down this path of being an expert in this Lean Six Sigma discipline.
Actually, it was fate or divine intervention. Jack Welch decided that he loved ex-military officers, and he mandated that 30% of all new management hires had to come from the junior military officer ranks. So I'm out interviewing, which that in of itself is a hilarious story, but I'm out interviewing in Penske Logistics, which was owned 79% by GE. They made this strategic decision to use all ex-military officers as their black belts. So I was hired right into it, and the rest is history.
You know, one thing I always find it interesting in this Lean Six Sigma we've had a number of people that have either jobs or connections with Toyota on the TPS Lean side, but GE has a particular place in the history of Lean Six Sigma that maybe not everybody understands. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about why we should know
really
about...
made it. Yeah, it really made it famous. Its origins were at Motorola, then Allied Signal picked it up, and I believe it was Jack Welch that said, I'm going to be the first to apply this to the non-manufacturing sector. So that was really the key. So GE Capital, I think GE Capital had over 100 companies that it owned, Penske Logistics being one of them. And so that was really, that was really what was unique. How do you take what was considered a manufacturing only sort of methodology and apply it to how long it takes to close a mortgage, how long it takes to close the books for the annual business plan or the accounting? We did projects on just speeding up the monthly close for accounting. So I think that's really sort of where it took off. And you're absolutely right. GE did so well with that I think I took 3 jobs in 14 months with 3 different companies just because I had a Master Black Belt from GE title on my resume.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I know, like with the Motorola, like the explosion of the pagers, and I think I've heard stories about how that was a notable implementation of reducing defects just because of the sheer volume of that.
Yeah, and sometimes people will say, "Oh, we don't make pagers anymore." I go, "Well, that's innovation. That doesn't have anything to do with a problem-solving methodology." Or the stuff that drives me nuts is, someone will go, that anti-Six Sigma, "Oh, if you look at the stock price of companies that do Six Sigma, it didn't outperform, the S&P 500 index fund." I go, "What on earth does a problem-solving methodology have to do with stock price?"
Yeah, I love that. And one of my questions was going to be to ask you about things that trigger you in the conversation of Lean Six Sigma, because that could be so many.
Well, I'll answer it. The thing that really triggers me today is, unfortunately, there's some diploma mills out there cranking out certificates, and then these kids or first-timers, they'll hop on YouTube and they'll share a PDF file of what Lean is and what Six Sigma is, and it's from the 90s. I mean, it's what Motorola did is not what we do today. And frankly, we don't even do today what GE did. It's really morphed. And so, yeah, I spent half my time going, no, I'm not here to do variation reduction unless variation is the problem. I'm not here to implement a quality program. I'm here to solve problems. And so I'm one of I think I'm probably unique in the industry in that I teach that this is not process improvement. We're not here to do process improvement. You don't randomly wander around your company looking for a process to improve. Something has to indicate to you
Yeah.
that a process might be causing a problem. So I teach that Lean Six Sigma is problem solving. And really, it's
Yeah, I
something your
love it.
mechanic should be using, your doctor should be using.
So I want to come back to that. I want to point out I think it's interesting that GE felt confident enough in their ability to turn you into a master black belt to say, hey, find me somebody with this military background and put them in this process that they have, I guess you could say, and we'll get great benefits. You said, millions and millions of benefit from these projects that we're on. I think that's an interesting thing. And GE is like this big conglomerate that has a lot of companies. I think one thing that's interesting there also, I know that there's a lot of, let's say, like private equity involved companies that are on this operational excellence, Lean Six Sigma. Hey, this is something we need to do to improve the businesses. So I think that at that level, I mean, all of the biggest companies have some version of this thing happening inside their organizations. And
Well, you'd be surprised,
yeah,
actually. You'd be surprised. I'm surprised sometimes to be brought into a major U.S. corporation that has no continuous improvement mindset whatsoever.
yeah. I think, our podcast here and part of our message is this idea of business improvement and continuous improvement. And, our audience tends to be people all along the spectrum. So sometimes it could be that high school person who's like, what's this master black belt job? And, should I be interested in this? Sometimes it is a master black belt who's struggling with something. Sometimes it's a director, vice president of continuous improvement trying to figure out how to not get their program cut or something,
Right, right.
something along those lines. So I'm curious in the work that you do, you teach a lot of people, you train a lot of people. Who are the folks that you're working with? And tell us a little bit about like the
Well, I mean,
scenarios
I've
that they're.
probably trained humbly, probably over 10,000 people in my career so far. And they run the gamut from, like I said, a new employee. I mean, I've been guilty of prejudgment. I trained 18 green belts in the poultry industry that were machine operators on the shop floor, just good old rednecks from Georgia or South Carolina. And I look and I go, well, this person is not going to, why did they send this person? And then that guy knocked it out of the park, just did a great project. So I've learned to not judge a book by its cover, so to speak. When you articulate this as problem solving, then everyone, and I also want to stress problem doesn't mean bad. So I once had an executive senior vice president for a major company that pays insurance, homeowners insurance out of escrow. And I did a couple hours and brought up problem solving. And he said to me, gosh, Lee, on break, I don't think we can do Lean Six Sigma. I go, I've never heard anyone say that. He goes, well, we don't have any problems. And I had to chuckle, and I said, "Oh, so you have a lot of your metrics are really best in class." He said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, do you have a metric that's like 94? And wouldn't it be cool if it was 96?" He said, "Oh, I've got tons of those." I said, "That's all we're talking about. We're just going to call the 94% the problem, and the goal is to get it to 96%. So if you take that mentality, to your point, every echelon of the organization can use it. I may find that I apply different tools with different levels of leadership. Like with senior leaders, I spend most of my time telling them, you did not articulate a problem, you gave them a solution, or you gave them your assumption of root cause. So, for example, a fast food chain, one of the biggest in the U.S., said, I taught MBA at one of the top universities in the U.S. for almost 20 years, Georgia Tech. And I would give companies in the Atlanta area free MBA students to do a project. And they said, hey, we'd like them to help us implement RFID. So that's an example where I said, well, we're not project managers. You've already got a solution. But let me ask you a question. When you have RFID, do you think something's going to go away? Yeah, we wouldn't serve chicken breasts over 20 minutes old. And I said, well, why don't you put the solution on hold and let my team first prove that you're even doing that? A lot of times executives tell me they have an issue and we go collect the data. It doesn't exist. So with executives, it's stop jumping to solutions, stop jumping to root causes, and talk in measurable terms. So, one more quick example. I know you want to ask me a question. You can't tell the team to go fix, you can't say, oh, that area is inefficient. What on earth am I supposed to show you 3 months from now to prove to you that I fixed something? So, I spend a lot of time with senior leaders trying to get them to talk in measurable terms.
I like that. What's the difference between a problem and a solution when it comes to project identification?
So, well, a solution is now let me take my car to the mechanic and tell him it won't start, and I'd like him to please replace the starter. Well, how do you know the starter's bad? Are you a mechanic? And if so, did you go through the process? Did you first see if the battery was charged? Did you see if it's getting fuel, gas? How do you know? So, the example, I've had a client, we need to build a new warehouse. And you go, well, why are you building a new warehouse? What's that going to fix? Oh, well, we have no pallet space in the current warehouse. And instead, we said, why don't we get rid of excess inventory, obsolete inventory? And we were able to free up 150 pallet spaces, and they did not need the warehouse.
So you did that instead of spending tens of millions of dollars on a new warehouse.
Yeah. Or I'll give you an example of thinking you know the root cause. There was a poultry company, and we wanted to. This is funny. I did not know that chickens don't have feet, they have paws. So we wanted to increase paw retrieval. My joke when I'm teaching in the South is that's getting daddy from a bar. Hey, paw, mama needs you. So only about 25% of chicken feet made it to market, and the Asian market will buy every foot. So this is a pure revenue play. So we say, let's tee that up as a project. And the plant manager goes, no, the reason we cannot sell these is because of ammonia burns. So chickens stand around in their stuff when they're being raised. So what he's doing is blaming the downstream process. What they call them growers. The growers are the reason we can't retrieve these feet. So I just said, would you just let us collect the data? Let us take what is discarded, sort it, and tell you what the number one reason is for why we can't recover them. He said, yeah, I'll be fine with that. It was something happening in the plant. So he
Interesting.
he ate crow, or I guess you could say he ate chicken, but it was a $10 part that was broken and they didn't know it that led to $1.2 million in revenue. But he would have canceled. He said no, thinking he knew the root cause.
God, that's a great story of I guess you'd say like trust the process. Like, hey, don't
Yeah.
jump to conclusion, but just
Well,
trust
I
the
I,
process.
I ran into a former black belt that I trained years ago, and I said, "Are you still using the stuff?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I still use it." And she said, "I'm famous for in meetings saying that's an opinion. Where's your data?" And I'm like, "Yes, that's my course right there. That's an opinion. Where's your data?"
So, if as a senior leader, if you've got somebody who's working on their project selection and they come to you with what sounds like more of a solution than a problem, how could you help me or help me go to the person that is working with me on this project to give me this to coach me to be
It's
more?
super, super easy. Let's see, from this, I draw the little L shape, I want to make a chart, right? So I want to make a time series plot. So I draw my little L graph and I go, here's a dot. I'm going to put a dot on, let's say, what is today? It's June, right? So June, July, August, September, October. I'm going to put a dot on October. We have implemented your solution. We did it. You were right. What's the chart? What got better, faster, cheaper, or went away? That's the project. So a major U.S. retailer, I was there, and they come to me and they go, help us improve the store theft program. Now, I'm a bit of a smart aleck when people give me unmeasurable statements. So I said, hey, why don't you just tell all employees to hide behind the aisles and then jump out when people come by and go,
I
you better
see.
buy that, right? And he got really upset. I go, dude, if somebody jumped out of an aisle and said, I see you, you better buy that, I'm not going to steal it. And then I said, I'm just showing you you're jumping to a solution. So I drew the dot. What gets better, faster, cheaper, or go away if we've improved the store theft program? And he said, oh, okay, I'm not so upset. We lose $500 million a year in shrink. And then I said, so you're just assuming that the only root cause is theft. And so that led to some projects. We went out and shopped over 200 stores in the United States. And this just one example, we found that $25 million a year walked out underneath the shopping cart, meaning the customer had put it under the shopping cart, but because of the cash register, the associate couldn't see it. and they just walked out with it.
Yeah, this is just a kind of a
Not
random,
stealing it, just
just
store shrink.
mistakes.
Yeah.
Do you shop at Costco?
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
so
yeah.
and that's called a paid cart. So in retail, it comes out of this cart and is transferred to the other cart. In retail, we call that a paid cart.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Sometimes as consumers, we see things that are just, I don't know, you probably don't give two minds to it, but as let's say an improvement professional of some kind, you're like, "Oh, I see what's happening here."
Yeah.
They do something with their receipts that is kind of, I'm sure, somehow
It's
targeted to like,
manual it's manual inspection. Well, they count the number of items on the receipt and see if you have the same number of items in your cart. I'd be interested to know how effective that is. I got out a couple weeks ago with something in my cart that I had not paid for, so it's not perfect. Yeah.
yeah, I was curious if there was any more of insight there on that particular
That's what they're
process.
doing. They're trying well, there's 2 things, like, people go, "Well, that's why Walmart has greeters." I go, "The Walmart person is not greeting you. They're there to see if you're walking out with something that wasn't rung up."
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, very nice. I've also heard you have some very specific statements about the Y's and the X's. Maybe you could explain to us the Y's and the X's of a good project.
So, the theme for this course is Y is a function of X. So, the Y is the mathematical metric that you're trying to improve, and the X's are what are the root causes. So I always use personal examples in my classroom. The Y is my weight. I've actually been doing a Lean Six Sigma project recently on my weight. So the Y is my weight. I was 255 pounds. And then I have 2 options. I can just jump to solutions. Lord knows there's a million Instagram food influencers out there. So I can just jump to solutions and eat cottage cheese crust pizza, or I can try to be analytical and try to identify the root cause. So right now, what I've figured out are the X's for me is number of calories per day, and I wasn't counting them. So really, the real root cause I wasn't count. I didn't even know how many I were eating. I was eating, so I've started to count my calories, which then leads to an even more leading. X's are leading indicators. Y are lagging indicators. So I know, for example, if I can burn 500 calories in the morning and intermittent fast until 3, I will not exceed the calorie count that I need to continue to lose weight. It'll be almost impossible. So now if we take that to that major US retailer, they were spending $3 million a year on whether or not store associates were greeting customers. 3 years they'd been doing that. So that's an X. That's something you're doing. And then I come along and I go, "Hey, I'm the new guy. Why are we doing this?" "Lee, you don't know that greets drive sales." And I said, "Well, no, I don't. Let me do the hypothesis test for you real quick." And there was zero correlation between greets and sales. And they had been spending $3 million a year on that.
I am curious if you have maybe some other stories about examples where the metric, the X's or the Y's were off and some better analysis uncovered something,
Well,
non-obvious.
again, the major retailer it's just amazing to me how many companies today have no one on staff that can do basic statistical hypothesis testing. And yet you've got leaders trying all these things and implementing all these programs. And I'm like, who on your staff is going to prove that this works? Have you ever thought of that? So that frustrates me. So here I go. I get called up to the big room, to the 18th floor where the big boys are and, the big girls. And Lee, we need a master black belt stats. So I go upstairs and this company was not very, brainstormy, groupy kind of thing. You know what I mean? But I was excited to see they were sticking Post-it notes up on the wall. And one guy stood up and he goes, "You know how Walmart sells balls in the aisles and cages? We should do that too." So you get, applause, applause. So I'm like, "Hey, what are we doing? What's going on?" And they go, "We're brainstorming how to grow sales." And I said, "Oh, okay. So sales must be the problem. Sales are down, right? I'm the master black belt." And they go, "Oh, no, no, profits down." And I go, "Well, why aren't we brainstorming potential root causes of why profits down?" "Oh, Lee, I get this all the time. You're not from our industry, so you don't know. You don't know that sales drives profit." So a quick regression analysis, there was zero correlation whatsoever between sales and profit. And so what I did was I got an Excel spreadsheet. I went to all the departments. I said, "Tell me what you think drives sales or profitability." So for example, human resources said, "Oh, I know stores where a higher percentage of people have completed the required training, they'll have better sales and better profitability. No correlation whatsoever. So I would say of the 30 X's predictors that they thought would predict sales and profit, I ended up with only 4 that had any correlation whatsoever. So that would be another example where people, have data and it's just amazing to me. They haven't seen if it drives anything. And that's a frustration too with my lean only friends. We have some lean only folks who just refuse to believe that Six Sigma has anything of importance to add. And yet, without exception, I've gone into lean companies. They're really good about charts and graphs all over the walls. And then I ask, who's doing the correlation study to see if these charts and graphs even correlate to what you think they do? And they go, what's correlation? So yeah, I could spend all day on that too.
Yeah, maybe perhaps this next question will take us too much down a tangent. I'm not sure, but let's say I've identified a problem statement, and I'm thinking like fishbone diagram or 5 whys, and I'm asking some of those questions. I use the word like brainstorming root causes. I personally have seen this recently where we get in and we're like, hey, let's solve this problem. Bring a group of people together, and I was the one that brought a problem, and I'm like, hey, let's talk about this. And then bringing everybody up to speed started to like build out that root cause of like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? How would you describe that? Or what language you put on? What course module would you say takes you from figuring out all the possible root causes to getting something more meaningful?
Well, I mean, you sounds like in your description, you're kind of brainstorming, and we're doing what Lean is very proud of, which is respecting our employees' knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? I've been in those events, and I can't tell you the number of times I have to spend much of that event telling people they have to talk in measurable terms. So, for example, this happened recently. A client had a big issue in the steel industry, and a provider came in and did an RCA with them. And I reviewed the RCA. One of the root causes listed was lack of training. Lack of training on what? Lack of training is never a root cause. It is what the operator failed to do or did do that's the root cause. So I'm making this up, but the operator put the knob on 30, it was supposed to be 50. That's a root cause. Lack of training, if I can be a smart aleck, you have given me an opinion. So if someone says to me, oh, the root cause is a lack of training, I'd say, ooh, go do some training. And then they look at you like you're nuts. And I'm like, well, you're the one that said lack of training. Or my favorite, the 2 solutions I get to every problem are lack of training and failure to follow the policy and procedure, or the SOP. And I'm like, I'm watching your forklift operator right now in the warehouse. He does not have a book open reading the policy and the SOP. And again, what specific step or activity did he not do or do wrong? That's the root cause. And then you prove to me that the SOP or training would have prevented that.
So
So
interesting.
I would say in your example, that's what I would have probably spent my time doing is number one, is the problem a measurable metric? So what I tell people is Lean Six Sigma is showing before and after improvement on a mathematical metric without jumping to solutions or assumptions of causation. And then people get really excited because the way I teach, I tell people we are detective. When people ask me what my job is, I go, I'm a detective for corporate America. And sometimes they go, ooh, there's crimes in there your building. And I go, there's murders in the building with Steve Martin. I go, well, my crime is the case of why it takes too long to hire somebody. But like a detective, define, measure, analyze. I've got to figure out who done it. And then the improve and control phase, I have to play prosecuting attorney and convict and get you leadership to buy into what I'm recommending as a solution.
You said just a minute ago about somebody that came into one of your Greenbelt courses, and maybe you underestimated them on day one. Is there a time that you can think of where maybe somebody came to a course because they were asked to, they weren't like totally engaged in it, but then you literally like saw the moment where the light bulb went on over their head and they, kind of like, I get this, and then turned into that,
Well, I think one thing
racehorse?
that's unique to me is I use personal examples in the class. I show people this methodology is something you can just use in your personal life. So I talk about using it to manage your debt, how to get out of debt. Your debt to income ratio is a great metric that you could fix. I usually ask my female students, the ones that'll do it, I say, go home and tell your husband the following because I know what he will say back. And when you hear what I'd say, you're gonna agree. But I'm usually right like 7 out of 10 times, and they come back like, "How did you know my husband would say that?" So, and I say, you got to be serious. You got to go home. You got to look at your husband and say, "You don't love me anymore." Now I'm worried one day a guy's going to go, "Oh my God, I've been trying to tell you." But what I say the husband will say is, "What are you talking about? I come home every night," or "I'm here, aren't I?" So what people do, "You don't love me anymore," is an opinion. When you hear an opinion, you make it measurable. She must be measuring me on whether or not I come home. You then collect the data. I come home every night. Hypothesis disproven. Argument begins, right? So I turn to the class and say, the Lean Six Sigma trained spouse comes home and says, the handhold ratio was 10 times per week. We've only held hands 3 times this week. Kisses per day were 5. You haven't given me a kiss in the last 2 days. Even better, well, I kissed you on the cheek. That is not the definition of a kiss, you know? So I find that the more you can show people, like I always use my weight as an example. You know, I'm trying to get my weight down. Here's this X. This was my hypothesis test. This is what I'm trying. I find that that really helps people. Okay, now I can just transition that over to the business world. You know, I also tell senior executives who love to give vision statements that are unmeasurable. You know, I had a CEO once say the vision for this year is double is doable. And I asked my green belt class, "Do you know what he's talking about?" Like, no. If you say that at home, they'll call you out for it. So whatever your vision is for the company, go home and tell your family, everyone gather around. Double is doable, and then walk away. And your wife will go, "What the heck are you talking about?" And the minute she does that, it's not measurable.
Yeah.
You have not given a measurable statement. So I find those interpersonal examples really help people grasp what we're doing. And sort of, again, it gets away from these urban legends that Six Sigma's variation, reduction, and quality. I've just saved your marriage.
Yeah, it's more, I like your example. It's more just structured problem solving, and everybody has problems, big or
Yeah.
small.
Or everyone has a metric they wish would get better.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Are you struggling to ignite real change in your continuous improvement program? Firestarter is your field guide. Real stories, proven strategies, no fluff. Get it now on Amazon. I wanted to ask you about hard versus soft savings, and just,
Okay.
how do you draw the line between those two things? Maybe a few examples of hard versus soft
For
savings. How do you teach people?
hard for me is very straightforward. You can add it to the income statement or remove it from the balance sheet. Everything else is soft. So just mentored and coached a project the other day, and the guy did a great job with a cost benefit analysis. I really like that he practiced it. I saved X number of man hours. It ended up being $325,000 worth of man hours saved, on a project that took maybe a month. That's another thing. Projects don't have to take long. I don't know where people get this urban legend, but I said, "Are the people still there?" He said, "Yes." I'm like, "Okay, you didn't save anything." His project was to reduce tool retrieval time. It took on average employees 30 seconds to retrieve each tool that they needed to do a task, and there were 10 tools. He got those down to sub 5 seconds per tool. I said, your savings is throughput. You're making more widgets. And here's the key though. Are you selling the widgets? So the example, go back to the poultry industry. Every extra paw we got was sold. But we did the same project here in Carrollton, Georgia on liver retrieval. We took that from 20% to 80, but they're still sitting in the freezer. So we did not book any financial revenue. The belt got certified because they did a great job, but there was no revenue. And so call center, I did a call center project once down in Miami, which Miami's fun. I felt like I was in a disco. What a culture. But we didn't need 4 people after the project. 2 departed and we did not backfill the positions, hard cost savings. And 2 moved to the sales call center. So we booked 1 year of their outbound sales as Six Sigma project savings because they were not there before. And that's typical in our industry. We typically claim the results for a year, and then after that, it's not new anymore.
The question about reducing people and saving money is really interesting right now. I know that, here we are in June of 2026, and AI is, everything, where everything's at. And so who knows, if somebody listens to this in September, we might all be replaced, is kind of the feeling, right?
Right.
In the Lean Six Sigma discipline, there's a guiding principle that says don't cut head counts.
As a result of your project.
Yeah, yeah. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, maybe with the perspective of AI and, people are trying to find these savings in AI. What should somebody do with that freed up capacity
Well, that's always
ideally?
the first I mean, again, in the areas of the projects I've done, people naturally attrit. So if you're a true company that values your people and you don't want to let people go as a result of continuous improvement, then you wait for someone to attrit or you move them into a revenue producing area. I tell my clients my goal is to get rid of the quality department in every company, but not the people, because quality's looking for defects when our vision should be that we're not making defects in the first place. And then, quality people get a little nervous in the classroom when I say that, but I'm like, you guys have some of the best knowledge of anyone in the company about the product. You should be upstream making the product or even better in sales. Like, we did a project once and we freed up someone in finance, but we ended up putting him in sales because he was one of the few people that could do all the pricing right there with the customer. The other sales guys had to call him to get help doing the pricing. So, as far as AI goes, I'm not too worried about that affecting continuous improvement, but it could certainly affect the industries that we're operating in terms of there may not be as I know to your point, the last 3 months of unemployment, we had great labor numbers yesterday. We added more jobs than we thought, but the last 3 months they said of unemployment were mostly related to AI layoffs.
Yeah. It's such an interesting topic. For any of our listeners, I know there's a lot of stories that people are blaming job cuts on AI. Some folks are saying maybe that's, kind of lazy on the behalf of some CEOs to say that. I don't know. I am particularly interested in jobs created through AI. Like if anybody, by the way, has a story of those, let me know. I'd love to hear those because and I agree with you. I think that folks trained in this Lean Six Sigma continuous improvement discipline broadly are uniquely positioned to do well in a changing environment, where change
Yeah.
is important.
Well, because
So,
you'll always have a need for continuous improvement. There just might be some more robotics involved. Well, you bring up a point, you talked about leading and lagging indicators. Unfortunately, whether or not it was AI that they let them go or they seized the opportunity, the market loves layoffs.
one thing about work, I mean, other than just earning a living, work hopefully can be interesting and engaging. And you strike me as somebody who really enjoys what you do, the work that you do. How has this discipline, how does it create, like, I guess, satisfaction and enjoyment in your work? And what advice might you give to others who are considering this as a career path?
Well, for me, I'm very ADHD, which has given me struggles in corporate America. I'll be quite honest. When I worked for the man, it was a little bit of a struggle. So, what I love about what I do today is really every week's different. So, a few weeks ago, I was in a steel mill watching rebar be made. And then, literally this week, I was in a vaccine manufacturer for chickens.
Wow, that's
So
cool.
I know how rebar's made, and I can tell you how a vaccine is made or how they make the rabies vaccine, which was very interesting. And then every classroom's different. I've got 20 people normally in a class, and so I get to meet different people and learn different things. Now, something I recommend to everybody, if you want a serious recommendation, and I'm sure they'd love this, if you go online, there's something called the Johnson O'Connor Foundation. And its research comes from the 1920s, 30s, used it to pick what jobs women should have for the war effort. And it's really fun. It's kind of into what we do. Y is a function of X. The Y is the job you want. Well, you should pick a job based on your aptitudes, and you're born with aptitudes. Hand-eye dexterity is an aptitude. You either have it or you
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
So this company, based on over 100 years of research, will test your aptitudes and then tell you the jobs you're best suited for. So I actually, after 2 years at Penske, was gonna leave Six Sigma and go into sales.
Mm.
And she said, "Oh, I bet you think you'd be good at sales." And I'm like, "Well, how did," because they give you a
How did you?
debrief, and the debrief is like they grew up with you. It is eerie. They know all about you. She goes, "I bet you go to the gym. I bet you give away information when you're at the gym. You offer advice." I go, "Yeah, I do." She goes, "You just need to find a way to charge for that." So it turns out one of the jobs I was best suited for was consulting. So, but anyway, she said, "I bet you think you'd be good at sales." I said, "Yeah." So they also test your personality. She said, "Well, you have an objective personality, but you're a people person." So I'm an introvert who's a people person. She said, "They rarely go together. A logical outcome for you would be the customer doesn't need the product and you tell them." And I'll tell you, even today, I have a client, I know I can bill them 10 billable days, and I say I can do it in 3. But they ended up telling me the jobs best suited for me were lawyer, detective, and consultant. And man, the light came on. I'm a detective in defined measure analysis. I'm a lawyer in improve and control, and I'm offering people advice and wisdom. I'm a consultant. So I stayed in the industry, and the rest is history.
I love that. That's one thing that's one thing I love about doing this podcast, talking to people like yourself, and really a lot of the people that I interact with in this continuous improvement discipline. There is something about like the shared mindset that we have, and maybe you call it like growth mindset or like the
Uh,
interest, just a curiosity about how things work. Like what you said, to be able to go from one industry to something totally different that on the surface might look like how could you possibly have anything to add in these two completely different industries, and to see like to pattern match and to see the similarities there. I
right.
think that is a unique skill that probably not everybody has.
Probably. Yeah, we got to pursue what we're good at. I always tell people a process is a process, and just different things go through it. But
Yeah.
you can see that steps don't add value. You can see waste. I challenge customers all the time to give people plant tours. I've solved problems for clients doing a plant tour. Just asking the dumb question, why are you doing that? Why is that there? Why is he driving back and forth across the warehouse? And they go, I didn't even notice. But I don't work there. So the exception stands out.
Are you saying you can offer a plant tour to someone and say, or
No, I'm
go do
saying
one yourself?
you give me a plant tour, I bet you I can find some projects just on the plant tour by asking you tough questions like, why did he go over there? Why did they go over there? What are they doing here? They really don't like when they take me through and I go, I just saw 40 things on that shelf, not a single label, and half of them are covered in dust. So what's going on? We'll talk about that later. No, I
Yeah,
say I challenge companies, like, when's the last time you gave your employees a plant tour? Because an employee just stuck in this little part of the process, you take them upstream and they may be able to find a whole wealth of opportunity that you hadn't thought of because, they're not blinded by that day in, day out grind that the other employees are.
I love that. That's a great insight. Lee, one thing that is an observation, perhaps wrapped in a question. I think that obviously this Lean Six Sigma discipline can be good for any company at any size, but I think that there's a particular opportunity where a company has more than one location, where the insights and the learnings and the lessons can just be like even, exponentially better.
Right.
Do you have maybe an example where maybe it's variation across like plants or functions at different places, but I guess like,
Well, I mean, first off, it's best practice sharing. The you do one project in one location, and then that belt can report out to the other. So one my steel client right now, when someone does a great project, like, they have the maintenance group, they have the operations group, they have the materials group. So someone did a phenomenal project on maintenance the other day, and now he's on a Zoom call telling everybody what he did and the lessons learned to see if they might be able to replicate some of that. So I would sort of say that. The flip side is, I was walking through. So again, when I say plant tour, that can be in an office environment. I am very nosy when I walk around your office. I'm looking at the bulletin boards because it tells me a lot about the culture. So it's June and the employee of the month is from February. Or the chart's last data point was March and it's June. Or even better, it's June, the chart is updated. And I turn to that area, I go, what's this? Keith
what
puts
is it?
that up. I have no clue, so one time I'm walking down the hallway of a major insurance company and there was a best practices meeting. And I said hey, can we sit in on that? They said, yeah, yeah. So we go in, we sit in. I'm really excited. And they go, okay, everyone, welcome. All right. So what should the best practice be? And I'm like, what are y'all doing? They were just coming up with a process. I'm like, that's not a best practice. You're just making up a process. So then they said, well, what would you do? I said, well, do you have more than one location doing this or more than one person? Oh, yeah. Well, what's the KPI of success? Let's just keep it simple. Speed, faster, better. Do a box plot across location. Here's the fastest group. Copy what they're doing. That's your best practice. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And they would be extremely frustrated to be the fastest at what they do, only to have you come along and tell them to now do a process that you made up in a conference room. So now you certainly want to make sure that their quality is good and they're not violating, government regulations or something. But that it still amazes me that they were just going to sit in a room and come up with a process, but they called it a best practice session.
Just come up with it. Yeah, that's interesting. I want to ask you a little bit about. I like this word rituals. You could say a reoccurring meeting or a meeting that gets scheduled every quarter as a version of a ritual. You just described one that I think is probably a good example, like a project report out, right? Like there's a certain ceremony I would
Uh-huh.
assume in that
Yeah.
report out, and you would probably say like, hey, this is a good thing to install inside of your organization to reinforce that this is important. Are there some other examples of rituals or behaviors that, obviously people have to do them right, but what are some of those that you would
Well,
like to see in a company that's operating at a high level of improvement?
yeah, we're getting to kind of where you and I first met, where it was a post I'd put on LinkedIn about the art of
Yeah,
storytelling.
that's
So,
right.
and I incorporate that into my Greenbelt class, but I believe that it's something that people can take through business, and that is storytellers can get people to move and get things done. One of the things we learned at GE was we had this we spent a lot of money on studying why change failed. And there's also the biggest one was failure to mobilize commitment, a failure to get the commitment to exceed its resistance. Like I tell people, there's nothing wrong with people being resistant to change. In fact, if they aren't, I don't think you're changing anything. Like you're filling a sinkhole in the parking lot. Nobody's going to complain about that. But, now starting next week, everyone's got to wear a blue shirt. Well, I would hope people would complain and ask why. And if you let that go underground, and I hope they'd ask, what's the definition of blue? Going back to, is it measurable? But yeah, so my course, I'm very particular that and I can't stand when I've seen companies force tool usage, like you have to do a
Yeah,
regression analysis. It's not even related to the project. But hey, the define phase, here's the metric I'm trying to fix, and here's where it is. The measure phase, I don't believe you. I don't believe Lee's 255 pounds. Well, let me show you with some charts and graphs or some other examples. So that's where it was going. One of the things we found at G was the 3Ds. We had the 3Ds matrix. People are motivated in one of their Ds. So people are motivated by either data, they like charts and graphs, demonstrate, they like to hear stories, best practice sharing. And then demand. Demand isn't necessarily being told what to do. It's what did the CEO say? Is he going to do 5S with us? What does his office look like? Right. So that's part of the art of storytelling, is being able to weave some things together that meets the data, the demonstrate, and the demand. So I work a lot with students on developing a PowerPoint deck that I call the storyboard. So the problem, Lee was 255. Measure, let me show you some graphs that prove that he's 255. Analyze, here's things that I thought were the root cause: too many calories, not enough exercise, too much wine at night. Now, that probably is a big one. Catering by clients, which really affects the other three, right? You can't exercise. They're giving you too much food and they're letting you get a glass of wine. Well, the improve phase is where I spend most of my time with people, because you're the prosecuting attorney. You have to convict the X. So it's the old game of Clue. I can prove it was the butler in the pantry with the candlestick. So, and then lastly, the control phase is tell me how you're going to make it stay fixed, right? Now, that's where lean comes in. If there's no candlesticks, can't happen. There's no pantries, it can't happen. So, yeah, I would say that's really one that I really drive, is getting people, because then that helps you. If you can get in that storytelling mode, you got the CEO in the elevator. You don't need a PowerPoint deck to tell him what you just fixed in the company that he may not have heard of. Hey, did you know, while I've got you, did you know it took 13 minutes on average for employees to get oil, put it in this machine? And while the oil is not in there, we have to stop production. And that's 100 widgets in 13 minutes. And we make $1,000 on those 100 widgets. And I figured out that the root cause was the layout. The literal layout was the root cause, and that the employee couldn't find the oil because it was mixed in the grease area. So I separated, this is a real project. I separated the two. I labeled everything. Now it takes them 5 minutes to get the oil and come back and put it in the machine. And so you don't need even slides to tell that story.
I like what you did right there because I can imagine, and maybe because I've been in a meeting like this, where somebody starts this status report with, hey, it takes 13 minutes to put oil in the machine, and here's what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. But you connected, I don't know if you'd call that a drill down or a drill up, but you kind of made like multiple leaps from that to maybe you could repeat that part of it and like what is it that you're doing? Because you got to the point where it was like, okay, that thing that you just mentioned, I know why that matters. Because if you would have just said it takes 13 minutes to put oil in a machine, I'm sitting here going, where do we put oil in machines? What is he talking
Yeah.
about?
Well, I tied it to the money, right? We talked earlier about the money. So, or to your point, who cares that it takes 13 minutes to put oil in a machine? Well, the
Yeah.
machine stopped. And well, what happens when the machine stops? We're not making parts. How much do we make on parts? Now that's been very helpful too. I tell my green belts that you will become some of the best at cost benefit analysis because you can most employees can talk. I tell them all the time, I'm not surprised that your boss said no to your idea because he heard cost and you couldn't articulate the benefit. And so what I find comes out of Lean Six Sigma is people are really good at cost benefit. I'll give you an example that $500 million project where stuff was missing. We found that one of the root causes was the literal cord on the scan gun in the lumber aisle in the garden center. It prevented the cashier from getting around the cart, so she would just double scan stuff or miss scan it. So we were the first in the industry to go to wireless scan guns. It was a $50 million expense that paid for itself in 1 year. In the meeting, someone tried to steal our thunder. He said, I recommended wireless scan guns 2 years ago. And first I said to my black belts, I said, sir, with all due respect, 2 years ago, you said, let's spend $50 million on wireless scan guns. And when asked why, you said, I think, I believe, I read, McKinsey told me. We walked in and said we could prove that $100 million is going out the door because of a cord on the scan gun, and it will only cost $50 million to fix it.
I think what I hear you saying, Lee, maybe indirectly, is if there's an executive out there that has some solutions in mind, some things that they want to do, but they're struggling
continuous
to
improvement.
Yeah.
Implement continuous improvement is a solution. And I always ask the clients, what do you think is going to get better, faster, cheaper, or go away by having a continuous improvement program? Because I don't want to be associated with one that has some wild idea, So yeah, I know where you're going. If you're an executive that has an idea of a root cause or a solution, nothing wrong with that. Pretend you did it and then ask yourself, what do I show people that got better, faster, cheaper, or went away? That then is the project. And then just think to yourself, do I really have the root cause, or is this really the solution?
Lee, I just have a few questions left. I refer to these as our rapid fire. So these are just kind of top of mind answers.
All right.
Kind of short question, short answer. The most important job of a leader is to blank
Listen to their people.
And do you have a favorite go-to problem-solving tool or, tool from the toolbox?
Talk in measurable terms.
Talk in measurable terms. I love it. Is there a book that you recommend or multiple books that you recommend?
Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, especially if you're a young man. Yeah.
Finish the sentence. Continuous improvement is
a way of life.
I love that one. That's awesome. Do you have a favorite question?
How do you measure that?
That's so good. Tell me something that is maybe a controversial opinion about Lean Six Sigma that, that may others may disagree with.
Well, I fight against the urban legend that it's variation reduction, quality, and process improvement. And just some people just aren't open to that conversation.
And do you have any prediction about where AI is going or where AI intersects with this, Lean Six Sigma discipline?
I think as far as the Lean Six Sigma goes, it would be, there's going to be a tendency when we get to the improve phase to think that AI will be the solution. And then there's probably going to be a tendency at the front end to not even do the project because AI will take care of it. So in both of those examples, I would again say, prove it, because you could see, hey, Lee, help us implement AI. And then I'm going to ask the same question, what gets better, faster, cheaper, or goes away?
Well, just from our conversation, I can tell you're deeply familiar with a lot of the statistical analysis tools. And, a lot of people that maybe this is why people are more pro lean and less pro Six Sigma is like that statistical and analysis, some of that deeper stuff. This could be a longer question, certainly, but are there some things in that project phase from start to finish where you have found AI to be a real assist or to like make that thing a lot easier to do?
I'm really scared for my software providers out there that I've fallen in love with. I won't name them, but I can now do statistics on my phone with ChatGPT. So I've got this real expensive $3,000 annual license software that I'm a big proponent of. It's still my favorite thing for training, but I just did a chi-squared analysis in the Amazon Print Center the other day on my phone. So I really, really feel for those folks, but I just don't see that I would not be going into providing a statistical software tool right now for continuous improvement if anyone asked me to invest.
Very interesting. Well, that's a great one. Well, Lee, is there anything that I should have asked you today that I didn't?
No, we've had a great conversation. If anything, you'll probably have to cut a few out. So I think we're good.
It's
I would
wonderful.
just say that I offer a course in person to anyone at Kennesaw State University. We've got one coming up in June. It's in Marietta, Georgia. And then, of course, I am available. I would say probably 80% of my training is on site in client locations. And some person randomly added me on LinkedIn the other day and just said, "Please, please, please, could you take a look at the project that I did? I'm not sure. I watched videos, and so he did not do the greatest of jobs, but I spent an hour with him on the computer helping him learn how to storytell. I really just helped him learn how to tell his story. He fixed something, but he couldn't tell the story well. So I'm always out there, if people want to, message me on LinkedIn or hop on my YouTube channel and watch a video and message me I love just helping people. To your point, I don't want my clients to hear this, but I'd probably do this for free, but I do like to get paid for it.
I think that's how you know that you're in the right job is when you can say
For
that, right?
sure. Yeah.
Like I would
Yeah.
I would do this for free because I just enjoy it so much. Not to say that you will want to do it for free because everybody loves to, be able to get paid for the thing they do. But man, if you can do the thing that you love to do and get paid for it, it's a beautiful thing. So Lee, I love talking to people like you that love to do the work that they're doing and would do it for free, you might say, because that's where you find like a good just a connection between what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what adds value for people. So it's been a
Right.
real pleasure speaking with you today. As far as like ways for people to connect to you, do you want to share a website or LinkedIn or anything? What's the best way for people
Yeah,
to?
if you add me on LinkedIn, the major thing is you can find me all over. Don't leave the E off my last name. So it's Lee and then Campe. So camp with an E. But yeah, LinkedIn. And then I have a YouTube channel under my name. Just type that's why I came out with that. There's a comedian called Lee Camp, but he's not as funny as me. So if you do Lee Campy, you'll find my YouTube channel. And it's a hodgepodge of videos. I've got a light board in my garage and I'd love to crank out. In fact, some of those videos you see are me answering students' questions. So, well, let me make a video and I'll send it to you. And then the email's simple. It's lee@leecampy.com. So very straightforward.
For our listeners, if you would like to suggest a guest, ask a question, or give us any ideas for episodes, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn also, Keith C. Norris. And this concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, be sure to add a comment. You can like, follow, subscribe on all the socials, and share the podcast with friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change. This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com.